There were then 40 pages of unrelated regulations, fees, taxes, and appropriations having nothing to do with the Troubled Asset Relief Program. In total, this appropriated more than $700 billion, contained 4 major pieces of legislation, and was passed by the Congress in 54 hours of introduction. Hundreds of bills over the history of the last 20 to 30 years have contained hundreds of billions of dollars of appropriations, regulations, fees, taxes, and bailouts that never would have become law had they been exposed publicly and even to the members of Congress. Now, this is 2 major problems we have with the way they behaved. The third problem I want to talk briefly about is how the Congress has purchased power over the people using this treasury. In 1974, we had an energy crisis, and the federal government, the Congress, passed a law mandating upon the states that they adopt a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. The state says, wait a minute, speed limits are states' rights. You can't tell us we have to have a 55-mile-an-hour maximum speed limit in our state. Well, okay, if you don't pass this on a national basis, just hit return. I'll postpone that later. Pretty soon there's going to be a Java update thing pops up too. I don't want to update it because it's almost 25 megabytes. I don't know how to get this thing from coming down. They want to download their word processing program, everything else. Anyway. They said, okay, don't do it, fine. We withhold all highway transportation money to your state if you don't do it. Well, they grumbled a little bit and they understood it's probably a temporary thing anyway, so every state then passed this 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, but the bigger problem occurred in 1984. In 1984, the Congress of the United States ordered the states to raise their drinking age to the age of 21. At that time, drinking ages were all over the place, 18, 19, 20, 21. It was a states' rights issue. You know why? Because it says right in the Constitution it is. The amendment that repealed prohibition left the sale of alcoholic beverages to the states. So here comes the federal government. It says you have to raise your drinking age to the age of 21. We don't want to do it. Well, you're going to do it or else, guess what? You're going to lose 10% of your highway money each year if you don't raise your drinking age. South Dakota didn't like it. Said you can't use your treasury to order us around. So they went to the Supreme Court. And to my surprise, Supreme Court ruled, yes, they can. In South Dakota versus Dole, the Supreme Court said it is an option for you to take the federal money. You don't have to take the money, but if you do, you must take their authority with it. That was confusing to me. Of course, I'm probably the only non-attorney here, but it was confusing to me because how did this money change in its authority? It started with the people, went to Washington, and after it got to Washington, it was coming back to the people. All of a sudden it became Washington's money and not the people's money. And to me, this set a very dangerous precedent because the Congress has almost unlimited ability to tax. They could take all of our money, and this is almost what they do today. They bring it back and dangle it in front of your nose. They say, if you want your money back, you have to take our authority. Well, that decision not only sent us down the slippery slope, but now we're traveling down it faster than an Olympic skier. That ruling has affected virtually every city, county, and state government, and even individuals in this country. Let's just briefly look at what has happened in schools. The House Committee on Education has now admitted the Congress has passed almost 2,400 pages of law that regulates the public school system in America, even though the Constitution does not give the federal government any authority over the public school system. The No Child Left Behind law itself, passed in 2002, created 670-some pages of law that affected the public school system, regulating almost every phase of the public school system. And right there in the bill was the language, non-compliance will cause the forfeiture of all federal funding to the school system. Not only have they used the power of the Treasury to expand it over governments, state, local, and city, it has also happened in the private sector. In the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act of 1987, most of you don't remember this. The Congress passed a law mandating upon every hospital that in their emergency rooms, they have to treat anyone who comes in. And if they cannot pay, the hospital has to pay for that themselves. So basically they said if someone doesn't want to pay at the emergency room, they still have to be treated. They are compelling a private sector company to provide services without compensation. That applied to all the hospitals that offered Medicare. If you participate in the Medicare program, you must participate in this program. When they passed this thing, the members of Congress all patted themselves on the back. They said, we're giving a great thing to the poor people of America, and it didn't cost Washington one penny. It didn't cost them because the private sector had to absorb this loss. Two problems with this. The hospitals couldn't afford it. They had to increase their private sector charges to those not covered by Medicare to compensate for the free services they were providing. Remember 1987? Remember when health insurance costs began to go up in the 1990s? This is a direct result of that, because this had to be passed on to the private sector health insurance premiums. The second problem is probably the biggest problem. Emergency room physicians, nurses, clerks, technicians, were not compensated for the services they provided. It is not unusual for 1 in 4 individuals to go into an emergency room today, and in some areas, half of the individuals go into an emergency room and not paying for the services. The physicians, nurses, and everyone else in that room are not compensated for that service. Now, they make it up somehow from wages from the hospital, but many of your emergency room physicians are paid on a per patient basis. So the federal government of the United States ordered physicians to work for no compensation, and I thought slavery was repealed. This is this ability that the Congress has and the federal government now has in compelling activity. Did you hear the bombs going off on that? Compelling activity among the private and public sector using their treasury far beyond the ability of the Constitution. Of course, the alternative now to change this is through the Article V convention process. And we've been because we know that Congress will not pass amendments that restrict their power. Let me tell you what's happening. We've created the Americans Freedom Amendments movement in conjunction with the 10 Amendments for Freedom. Our website is 10amendments.org. You can go there and try to find out, all the things we're doing. But this, we are going to be proposing at an Article V convention 4 amendment topics. 1 is a balanced budget and no more debt amendment topic. 2, single subject legislation. That no bill can be introduced in Congress unless it is a single subject. 3, the federal government will not be able to use its treasury or ability to tax to coerce local government or the private sector into doing things which are beyond its constitutional authority. And the fourth topic will enable the state legislatures through basically 2/3 vote to be able to veto acts of Congress. Now, this amendments resolution has been designed and has been circulated, and let me tell you what's happening. At this point right now, by the end of this month, I'll have a sponsor for this amendments resolution in every state. I'm in approximately 40 states at this time. In December, we are going to have an assembly of all the sponsors and all the legislative leaders that want to come. And at that assembly, we will finish the text, the final text of a common Article V resolution, the topics that will be included, and the rules for the convention. That amendments resolution will be introduced in every state legislature in January. Given the mood of this nation, it appears to me that there is a true opportunity for at least 34 states to pass this resolution during 2011. The response I have received from legislators and the people is that they overwhelmingly want this to happen. And it's going to be exciting. When we introduce this in January, not only that, but the meeting we're going to have in December is news Never in the history of this country have we ever had such a unified effort for an Article V convention for the purpose of restraining the national government. When they're introduced and these states begin to pass these Article V resolutions, then they will. We have states right now. I met with two leaders of two states just in the last 3 days. They want to be the first ones to pass it. And ironically, there are two states that did not pass it in 1992 for the balanced budget amendment. That the enthusiasm among the legislative community is a direct reflection of the anger of the people. But it's going to be so exciting because after we get 10, then the momentum is going to be building. And when we get to 30, and that 30th legislature begins to meet, the national media will descend upon it. And because we have more than 100 television stations today and the internet working, the American people will fully understand the nature of the Article V. They will understand these issues of the debt and the abuse of the federal government, and they will understand why we're having this. And we get to number 31, and even more media will show up for that. And more the American people will be educated on why we have to have this convention. And by the 34th state, when they go to vote, international media will be there. And when we convene this convention, it will be the most exciting thing. And it'll be exciting not because of what will happen. It's exciting because we are doing it. And the rest of the world will see this. They will say, gee, the American people, they can control their government? They can change their national government? Maybe we ought to do that. And this will spread around the world, this idea that the people can control their government. This might be our last chance, however. The generation of Judge Brennan, who fought in the war, excuse me, and died for liberty, are fading. My generation, the baby boom generation, the best educated generation, are beginning to fade. We are the last generation to have learned about freedom and to learn civics. When we are gone, this will never happen. This is our last chance. Thank you.